The 2026 FIFA World Cup has already claimed its first victim. 7 days ago, Somali referee Omar Artan, named Africa's best referee in 2025, selected by FIFA to officiate at the biggest tournament in football history, was stopped at Miami International Airport, denied entry into the United States, and sent home. He never got to walk onto a World Cup pitch. The dream he had worked his entire career toward was taken from him at a border checkpoint. The world reacted with outrage. FIFA issued a statement, and most people assumed that was the low point of this tournament before a ball had even been kicked. They were wrong. The 2026 FIFA World Cup has just taken its second victim, and this one is bigger, messier, and more complicated than anything that came before it. Thomas Partey is a 32-year-old Ghanaian midfielder with one of the most decorated club careers in African football. Thomas Partey rose through Atletico Madrid's academy, won the Europa League and the UEFA Super Cup with Atletico, appeared in a Champions League final, and in 2020 became the most expensive Ghanaian player in history when he joined Arsenal in the Premier League for £45 million. He spent 5 seasons at Arsenal, making more than 160 appearances for the club, before joining Villarreal in Spain in 2025. Internationally, Thomas Partey has 57 caps for Ghana and entered the 2026 World Cup as vice-captain of the Black Stars, the second most important player in the entire squad. Ghana had spent weeks preparing for their opening group stage match against Panama in Toronto, Canada, on June 18, 2026. The squad had been based at Bryant University in Rhode Island since arriving in Washington on June 4. The preparation was focused. The squad was healthy, and Thomas Partey, despite everything swirling around him off the pitch, was in the starting lineup. Thomas Partey did not play against Panama in Toronto. On June 17, 2026, one day before Ghana's World Cup opener, a Canadian federal court in Ottawa formally rejected Ghana's appeal to allow Thomas Partey into the country. The reason the Canadian federal judge rejected that appeal begins not with the 2026 World Cup, but with a February 2022 complaint filed with London's Metropolitan Police. In February 2022, while Thomas Partey was still playing for Arsenal in the Premier League, a woman reported an allegation of rape to London police. That investigation ran for more than 3 years. During that entire period, Arsenal continued to select Thomas Partey, who made over 100 further appearances for the club after the investigation began. On July 4, 2025, 4 days after his Arsenal contract expired, Thomas Partey was formally charged in Britain with 5 counts of rape involving 3 women and 1 count of sexual assault. He was granted conditional bail, barred from contacting the complainants, and required to notify police of any international travel. 2 days after those charges were filed, Villarreal signed Thomas Partey on a 2-year contract. Then in February 2026, a second set of charges arrived. A 4th woman alleged that Thomas Partey had twice raped her in December 2020, also during his time at Arsenal. Thomas Partey pleaded not guilty to those new charges in April 2026. His total charge count now stands at 7 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault involving 4 different women. His trial, originally scheduled for November 2026, has been pushed to early 2027 after Southwark Crown Court consolidated all charges into a single proceeding. Thomas Partey has pleaded not guilty to every count. His lawyer has stated publicly that he welcomes the opportunity to clear his name. Ghana head coach Carlos Queiroz selected Thomas Partey for the 26-man World Cup squad regardless, defending the decision on the grounds that the presumption of innocence applies until a court rules otherwise. But Canada had a different view. Canadian immigration authorities denied Thomas Partey a visa to enter the country. Under Canadian immigration law, individuals who have been charged, not necessarily convicted, of a crime can be refused entry if assessed as a possible security risk. Canada did not publicly confirm or explain the specific reasoning behind the denial, citing privacy rules. What is known is that the application was denied, and that Ghana immediately filed an emergency appeal with Canada's federal court seeking to overturn the decision in time for the Toronto match. That appeal was heard by a Canadian federal judge in Ottawa on June 17, 2026. Thomas Partey's lawyer Makeda Bramwell argued before the court that Canada, as a co-host nation of the 2026 FIFA World Cup, had a public interest in allowing the orderly participation of accredited national team athletes. In a statement submitted directly to the court, Thomas Partey said he had not been convicted of any offense, that he had pleaded not guilty, and that he remained presumed innocent. He stated he would remain under constant supervision of team officials and would leave Canada the moment the team departed. The judge was not persuaded. The appeal was rejected. Thomas Partey remained in Rhode Island while his teammates took the pitch in Toronto against Panama. Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs called Canada's original denial a high-handed and extremely unfair decision. Ghana forward Brandon Thomas Asante, speaking to reporters before the ruling, said, "He's a tremendous player. Everyone knows his ability, and it's an unfortunate situation. I think as players, we have to adapt." There is a detail in the Thomas Partey case that the Ghanaian government's protests carefully avoided addressing. According to a report by The Athletic, Thomas Partey had falsely claimed on his Canadian visa application that he was not facing criminal charges. If accurate, Thomas Partey did not simply have his visa denied on the basis of criminal charges alone. He reportedly misrepresented his legal situation to a government immigration authority. That transformed the case from a question of whether Canada would admit an accused man into a question of whether Canada would admit an accused man who had provided false information on a government document to gain entry to the country. The Canadian Federal Court answered that question clearly on June 17, 2026. Thomas Partey is eligible to play in Ghana's remaining 2 group stage matches, both in the United States. Ghana faces England on June 23 at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, and Croatia on June 27 in Philadelphia. Thomas Partey holds a valid United States visa and faces no travel restrictions for those fixtures. The absurdity of the situation is therefore this. The second most important player on the Ghana national team cannot enter Canada to play the first match of his country's World Cup campaign, but can cross into the United States 2 days later and potentially play against England as if nothing happened. Whether Ghana head coach Carlos Queiroz can hold his squad together tactically and emotionally through this disruption is the central football question. But the Thomas Partey case raises something far larger than one player's availability. It raises the question that FIFA has spent years carefully avoiding. What is FIFA's responsibility when a player it has officially accredited for a World Cup is facing 7 counts of rape? FIFA credited Thomas Partey for the 2026 World Cup. FIFA issued him the documentation that identified him as an official participant in the tournament. FIFA took no action when the charges became public. FIFA issued no statement about whether players facing serious criminal allegations should be permitted to represent their nations at the tournament. FIFA left the question entirely to the host nations. And when Canada answered that question by refusing entry, FIFA responded with the same 11-word statement it has used for every immigration controversy at this World Cup. FIFA is not involved in the immigration processes of host countries, including the adjudication of visas. FIFA said the same thing about Omar Artan. FIFA said the same thing about Iraqi striker Ayman Hussein, detained for 7 hours at O'Hare International Airport. FIFA said the same thing about Iran's coaching staff, denied entry despite their players being cleared. And now FIFA has said the same thing about Thomas Partey. That statement, repeated word for word, controversy after controversy, has become the defining sound of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Not a goal, not a chant, not a celebration. A press release that says, in 11 words, that FIFA bears no responsibility for anything happening at the tournament it built, organized, and profits from. The first victim of the 2026 World Cup was Omar Artan, a man who did nothing wrong, whose only obstacle was holding the wrong passport at the wrong airport in the wrong political moment. The second victim is Thomas Partey, a man whose situation is far more complicated, whose own choices played a role in his exclusion, and whose case forces everyone watching this World Cup to sit with questions that have no clean answers. One thing in both cases is identical. FIFA pointed at someone else and walked away. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Canada made the right call on Thomas Partey? And where does FIFA's responsibility end and the host nations begin? I want to hear both sides.